So I wrote this little blurb about my idea of this gilded cage. I didn't use the term of the gilded cage because I was watching this Marshall McLuhan and the cave mentality, the cavern mentality that Spengler calls the Magian, which has to do with the Arab Judeo-Christian mentality or perspective. Anyway, all these things were coming together in my mind, and it's just a two-page thing, and I think I'll read it because what I was sharing with my parents was that as far as my dad said, you got to write some of this stuff down because the way I was describing it at the moment, you know, he says you should write something. You've got to write something, and I was telling him I have two concerns. The first concern is that I can be really creative, but then when it comes to the editing process, I get short timer's disease kind of thing. It's like, oh, I just want to rush through it, and it's never perfect enough, and I want to include everything, and so there's that. And then I'm concerned. My concern has to do with what I produce will not be good enough for me, and it will end up being not enough, and then I want to expand on it, expand on it, expand on it. And then the other concern is that once I do write it, then I'm going to have to contend with everybody's opinions about it. And I told him I want it to be something that can just stand alone. You know, I see the artists as people who write these creative things to just let these creative things stand alone. And oftentimes they go into fantasy and sci-fi and everything because then these things are so fantastic that they're not really applied to everyday life, and then they're protected, inoculated. They've inoculated themselves from really having to discuss, contend with other people's opinions. It can stand alone, sort of thing. Anyway, this is what I wrote. When we are in an enclosed space filled with knowledge, we retain our size. Leap into the unknown sphere of expansiveness, and we shrink. The ego is what compensates for our mind's eye so as to create an equilibrium of sorts. The ego inflates and deflates according to the knowledge we contain ourselves within. And this is the point I shared with my mom and dad, is that I have been deflated in the past, and they know this intimately. They know that they know me, and they know many of my main experiences, and I was telling them, you know, I really respect certain people in my life, and I want to have them in my life, but I don't want to be overblown or deflated by them. I just want them to accept me as I am, because I love and respect them enough to accept them as they are. And they're not a threat to me unless they're threatening. And if they threaten me, then I am going to either overinflate or deflate in response. And I feel that this is the whole reason why they threaten me in the first place. They either want an inflated me or a deflated me, usually a deflated me, a smaller me, something they can be in control of. But what I found is that I have this expansive ability to just expand greater and greater and greater, and I can still retain myself. But then at that point they just go, they look at me, I'm so big, and then they discount and devalue me completely. And because I'm so ego inflated that in response to their threat, that you don't have to take me seriously anymore. You know, these are all mind techniques to protect ourselves from chaos, from that which is beyond our control. This is the whole point to building this knowledge base in which we can contain our size. I think that the lecture in McLuhan's, he uses these analogies, and he said this father and son went on an airplane, and then the son asked the father, "So, Dad, when do we start shrinking?" And it all came very clear to me that this idea of size and our place in the world and where we are fit in the world is a matter of perspective, and these perspectives change over time. Experience has a tremendous influence on them. Obviously, someone who's been up in a plane realizes they don't shrink, but a young child looking at a plane, only understanding a plane from the ground and seeing it in the sky up high, would assume that obviously, oh, they shrink, which is a wonderful little magical view. This is what I added in. Experiential knowledge can influence, however, the stance and posture we take in relation to our experience is guided by our equilibrium brought about by our ego. Relation, or relativity, is what is created when we leave the cavern or cave of our self-constructed knowledge base bubble. In movement through experience, the ego defends itself from becoming too deflated by puffing itself up. This changes all the values given to things experienced. Values inflate and deflate in relation to the ego. In the ego having a defensive stance and posture, the warrior arises as the character of the ego. The I concept protecting and defending itself to retain its equilibrium in relatedness to what is experienced. In so doing, war and conflict arises, characterizing this developmental process. The idea of chaos and to bring order finds its roots entangled, Peduma, like gristle in muscle, within the ego desiring an equilibrium between inner and outer existence. So these are just quick little notes that I write down while I'm on the treadmill listening to my lectures. But this prepared me for a conversation that I ended up having with my family that I feel was very effective. But also, it depends on how much they retain of our conversation. And this is where relatedness comes in. You continually be the thing that you are, and then it sinks in deeper for others. And some people are quicker studies than others. But then, being a quick study, you've got to watch out that they, go deep enough to really feel the weight and the depth and the meaning of your being. Have a good day.